There's been a lot of change to the Philadelphia Eagles in 2024, including their coaching staff, but a lot of the players are the same. What players could have different roles, though, this year with the change in the coaching? We'll get into that coming up next and more on this Monday edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast.
You are Locked On Eagles, your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in, Eagles fans, to this Monday edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast. I'm Louis DiBiase, joined as always by my co-host, Gino Camilleri. Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. They help you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply. Eagles training camp is just 2 days away. Technically, the players do report tomorrow. They hit the field on Wednesday. Football is back, and it's been cool to see other teams get on the field, but once those midnight green helmets come on, that's when it really feels like football's back.
I thought the funniest thing from today was the wife of Darius Slay tweeted out a picture of him getting dropped off at the airport, and she said that he kind of did a joking sob that he has to go off to training camp for his 12th year, which is pretty incredible that they have guys that are in their 12th year. Brandon Graham in his 15th year, but also the excitement right around the corner for so many young guys on this team. And I think that's where you and I are the most excited of what this team can develop into. And the old Nick Sirianni quote, this is where the flowers are going to be watered, and this is where the roots are going to take shape. And I'm excited to see them back on the field, man. Wednesday, we're going to see it. They report tomorrow. They'll do all their medicals, weigh in. Then they're going to hit the practice field, and it's going to be rapid fire. The open practice is, I believe, on August 1st at Lincoln Financial Field, or
the 10th on
the
that
10th?
Thursday,
okay.
The second week.
Right, I forgot the 0 in there. August 1st, my birthday, though. But man, it's the best time of year, and before we know it, we'll have preseason games to evaluate, which will really start to put the pieces of the puzzle together. But a lot of those guys that were part of the puzzle last year, Lou, they might fit into this chain link a different way moving into 2024.
And that's what I wanted to start with, Gino, because you look at a lot of these core pieces that have been on the team for at least a few years now, some long-term. You look at the new coaches. I don't think it's going to be a completely different team where all these guys are asked to do completely different things. I think Vic Fangio, even proving me wrong, it sounds like is much more open to molding the scheme around the strengths of the players. I think same with Kellen Moore. But those guys are very different stylistically than some of the past Eagles coaches. I think on offense and defense, you're going to see a lot of change. And that will include players that have been here. They're going to be asked to do different things. And one guy I was thinking about the other day is A.J. Brown. Honestly, Gino, I wouldn't be surprised. Not that suddenly his deep game is going to go away, but A.J. Brown, the Tennessee Titan, was seen more. He's always been an elite receiver. He's been seen as that since he came into the league in 2019. But stylistically, the way he produced in Tennessee versus Philadelphia, if you look at it, it is very different. He was a run-after-the-catch guy, someone that ate over the middle of the field. They used him in the screen game a lot in Tennessee. They just really weren't a field-stretching offense. And then in Philadelphia, he's, I don't want to say primarily been a deep threat because the guy eats in every part of the field. But wouldn't you agree he's done most of his, damage deep, right? Or, 15 plus yards downfield, where this year with Kellen Moore's offense, I don't know. I feel like they're going to try to get him back to, at least to a degree, using him in certain ways that Tennessee did to completely utilize his skill set in the open field.
Let's take a step back to when Kellen Moore first was able to start calling plays. Who was the most important part of that Dallas offense for him? It was CeeDee Lamb.
Right.
Now let's move to LA. Who was the most important part of the offense for him in LA? It was Keenan Allen. Do those two players and their play style not resemble exactly the player that you were just talking about, Lou? This person who is going to be used in a multitude of different ways. And I can just imagine Kellen Moore salivating at the ideas he can use to get A.J. Brown these free releases. You look at Mike McDaniel and what he does for Tyreek Hill down in Miami, it just makes him impossible to guard. And I think there's a chance that A.J. Brown could get back to that caliber of player. And that's saying he's already elite. We're saying he's just like a soul-breaking type of player because
Right.
he can go for close to
which he already is. It's more the difference in how he's going to produce. Like the production has not changed. It's gotten better in Philadelphia.
It's not going to be these 50-50 jump balls and like 0 yards after the catch.
Right.
He's tackled at the catch point. No, they're going to get him the ball, quick hitters and just quick slants, like right into zone coverage where he can use his eyes, use his vision, just turn up field, use him in ways that CeeDee Lamb is used against you, and these other top receivers are used against.
Like you'll probably see him in the slot more. I think you'll
better
probably see him more in pre-snap motion.
Receiver or cornerback is going to be able to defend him, and how many times are you going to be able to get him into these free zone looks like a Travis Kelce, where you just say, "Hey, we're going to motion you to the zone side." Recognizes if they're playing man or zone, and you're just going to go sit in space and then make a cornerback or a safety tackle you.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing. A.J. Brown has been a better receiver in Philadelphia than Tennessee. I'm not saying he's going to produce more than what he's done in Philly the last 2 years. I think, though, the production is going to be different. I think he's going to be a more well-rounded, and again, that just feels wrong saying because of how good he's been. But you know what I'm saying? Like they'll use him more creatively and use some of the other skill sets that the Nick Sirianni, Shane Steichen offense sometimes just did not call for.
I think as many yards as AJ has in the air, he could probably split that number, and that's how many yards he has after contact.
Sure.
Like if he had 750 yards in the air and 750 yards after the catch to eclipse 1,500, I think that's a pretty good number for him because you're talking about a guy who, what's his average yards per catch? He's right around that 10-yard plus marker. Now get him the ball in space where you're not just throwing him the ball to the stick where he's not able to get open and run. That was the best part of his game and Dallas Goedert's game. And they got away from that completely. And Devontae Smith can kind of do everything, and so can AJ. But why would you limit yourself? Why just use 50% of this guy's skill set? This is really going to be that almost probably like Super Saiyan type of evolution, right? Where there's just this little bit left on the table, but that little margin, when you get to the top, it's so much harder to get to that next level. But I think AJ with Kellen Moore is a match made in heaven, and I'm excited. Unlike last year where we're like, okay, we kind of knew what the offense was going into this year. I had no idea. Riddle me what this offense is going to be. I'm excited to see how it transforms.
And, that's another reason I think Jalen Hurts is going to be asked to do different things this year as well. Like, this is a very different offense Jalen's going into than he's used to at the collegiate level. I don't want to say it's more of a pro-style offense, but I think he's going to be asked to go through more than one or two reads more consistently than he has been, where he's going to have to throw with more anticipation. I just think it's going to call for a lot more from him, too, from a mental perspective. And then just other things like I think he's going to line up under center more than he's used to do more traditional play action. You're going to see more of a, again, traditional might be the wrong word, or like pro style might be the wrong word, but maybe traditional is right from what Jalen's asked to do as well.
And at the same time, what Kellen Moore did in LA last year, a lot more of it was vertical, like side to side too. Right. So we got to get used to that rather than just straight, actually horizontal.
Yes.
I completely
the Eagles offense was
the Eagles offense
vertical.
Was just straight vertical.
It's all
nothing in the
honestly.
middle. There's nothing short. There's going to be plenty of options. And like you said, he's going to want Jalen to go through multiple progression. There's going to be choice routes for guys like AJ Brown who, hey, if you get man, let's run a fade. If you get zone, run into space. We're going to find you. And I think it's to the betterment of them all because Jalen Hurts, I think he does best when he's challenged at the quarterback position, when they make him put the team on their back and there is that expectation. And I think he needs to take that next step mentally too. So bringing in a new, fresh set of eyes, a new voice in his headset, I think that's going to work to the betterment of Jalen Hurts and AJ Brown slightly by tweaking their game. I think we know what Devontae is going to be. Same with Dallas Goedert, and Saquon is going to be all world. But AJ Brown, probably you will see the biggest tweak in play style moving forward.
I completely agree on the offensive side of the ball. And then on defense, I think the two guys that might play the most different, the different role compared to what they're used to, and you could say from college to the pros and from just what they did with the Eagles, I'd say Avonte Maddox probably being asked to play more of a safety slot hybrid. He's been mostly primarily a slot corner. I think they're using him more as a safety, at least so far with the way this offseason's gone. And then even Cooper DeJean, is as much as we think his skill set will translate very well. I mean, you had him ranked as your number one safety in this draft class. We think he can be a starting slot. I think he's going to be the starting slot week one. That wasn't something like at Iowa. You look at his film, like the traits can translate to be a versatile player, but he was primarily their CB1 shutdown top corner on the outside. So I think those two, maybe out of anybody on the defense, DeJean and Maddox are going to be asked to do very different things than what they're used to.
It's an intriguing take on it because I don't see a role for Avonte, and if he does, I think it's going to be more towards
if he has a role.
position.
It's going to be like you're the primary third safety until Sidney Brown is back, and that's not something, I mean, since 2018, he was asked to do it in Tampa the last year, but outside of that, really has not done that.
The DeJean one is the one where you can say there's so much unknown with how they are going to incorporate
100%, which is one of my favorite things I'm looking forward to in Camp Gino is to hear on the weekly, like, how are they using Cooper?
And a lot of projection goes into that as well. Yeah. And I think that's why you see a little bit of a slide from potentially first round, which his talent had shown, to that pick where they picked him, because teams don't like the unknown of guys that are positionless. Guys, I think that's a positive
to me.
Yeah,
I think
I agree.
I think some people don't want to deal with that. The complexity almost stresses them out a little bit, and I think that's a good player to have on your football team.
Yeah, I completely agree on that. And my concerns more for my eyes kind of perked up when I heard this conversation brought up by you of how much is the role, not just for Jalen Carter, because we know it's going to be pivotal for him, but the role of not just Jordan Davis, but Milton Williams. One of those two guys is going to play a full-time role for this football team.
Yeah, and neither one of them have ever done it before.
They've never done it. They've never played full starter minutes.
Yeah.
Jordan Davis, we talked about the conditioning concerns later into the season. He is in the best shape of his career. We know that they put a lot of stock into him being that 13th pick to potentially be a 3-down player for you. Milton Williams, I think he has all the tools in his bag. They're kind of just waiting for him to have a position ready to roll, and you shouldn't forget about his name in that conversation, man, because if it's just evident that he's a superior pass rusher to Jordan Davis,
he'll play more than Jordan Davis.
He's going to play more than Jordan Davis, because this team, and especially in a Vic Fangio world where, one, they're going to play fewer guys with their hands in the dirt on the defensive line. 2, those guys are going to be asked to move a lot because you're going to have to man 2 gaps. You're going to have to get side to side to take up a lot of space. And 3, you have to do everything. You have to be a chess piece in his defense. And if you can't rush the quarterback, and teams know what you are and they can kind of just take you out of the ball game by scheming you out of the equation, you can't scheme Jalen Carter out of the equation. Do that with Jordan Davis if he's out of shape and doesn't have that quick first step. But Milton Williams, man, that game-breaking potential is in his body, and we've seen it at times, man. You talk about the flashes of game-saving brilliance for this team. He's probably the most unheralded, unsung defensive lineman. He's
played the best later on in the season.
In the last couple of years.
Yeah, he's played best too when it's the most important games, like late in the season, playoff time. I agree. I think there's going to be a lot of experimenting, a lot of new roles for players that have been here for a bit. And we'll figure that out starting up on Wednesday as Eagles training camp officially begins this week. We got you covered right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast. Coming up next, we talked about new roles, but what's some of the old reliables that we know we can rely on with this 2024 Eagles from the chemistry department? We'll get into that coming up next right here on Locked On Eagles.
And we roll along. This episode of LOE is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. I love sports. I love them so much. I never want them to stop. But as playoff season winds down, we get fewer games, and the sports aren't sportsing like I want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone, every day, all summer long. So right now, head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. The Paris Olympics are right around the corner. NFL training camp is coming up. You're going to be able to go and wager on games over at FanDuel. Some futures you could put in: Offensive Player of the Year, MVP, MLB is still going on. All 4 major sports will be back before you know it. So head over to FanDuel.com. As I said, FanDuel is the official sports betting partner, Major League Baseball, and the entire Locked On podcast.
Thanks so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Guys, you watch Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day, got to turn down the volume with all the shouting. Make the switch to Locked On Sports today. It's a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So we were talking about new roles for, some Eagles that have been here for a bit. A.J. Brown, Jalen Hurts. You look at on the defensive side of the football, maybe Avonte Maddox, Cooper DeJean. Gino mentioned Milton Williams and Jordan Davis. One of them's got to be a full-time player if the Eagles are going to have success this year, and they're going to have to step up in that role. But, Gino, what do you think, when it comes to this team that has a lot of change on the coaching staff, on the personnel department for offense and defense, when it comes to chemistry, because that is something that's very important, and it's been how the Eagles even overachieve in certain seasons when they don't have all the right pieces. In the chemistry department, where do you think the Eagles, they have the most reliable chemistry? Where do you know, in moments this year, you can go to these guys and there's a floor there, you can just always depend on them, and it may be it's in a duo sense because of. I think that's something with Fletcher Cox and Brandon Graham every year. You always knew those guys would step up in the clutch. I think, at times, Zach Ertz and whether it was Carson Wentz or Nick Foles, that was a connection you could always rely on. What about that for this year with a new team?
I think with a new team, you go back to the well, and you go to the 3 amigos. You go to your quarterback and his 2 best friends at wide receiver. They could probably make an incredible buddy sitcom, the 3 of them. I think they all bounce well personality-wise off of each other. And not just that, they're unbelievable football players who make plays in the absolute biggest time of the season. You look at that Super Bowl, without A.J. Brown, Jalen Hurts, and Devontae Smith.
Oh, they get blown out.
It's not even a game. It's not even a game.
They were the only 3 people carrying them in that game.
Yeah, it is. And the way I look at it, when you talk about chemistry, if you ever play EAFC or FIFA, it was called for the longest time, you play the ultimate team mode. They have the chemistry meter, between the guys, are your midfielders, are they on the same page? These guys, this is all green. This is a triangle. They're all green. They have great chemistry. It's at 100. And this is the one talking point that, if you go back to our episodes before they drafted Devontae Smith, I come from a world where Devontae Adams and Aaron Rodgers were the way I molded my thinking.
I was
going
to say, used to bring this up a lot. Yeah.
Wide receivers and quarterbacks, where you can have this connection that every year it gets exponentially better because you can just tinker and I use the Formula One car all the time. It's like this Formula One car where you're like, oh, it's fast, but how can we make it even faster? How these back shoulder throws develop. How do these timing spacing routes develop, where you have to know where the guy is right at his landmark, exactly where he's going to be. That chemistry, you can't buy it.
That can be the difference deep in playoff runs, Gino, when you're playing great teams every week.
If you don't trust in the guys that you're throwing the ball to, you said you just watched the show Receiver on Netflix. Talk about Devontae Adams.
That's pretty much all those guys, man.
Jimmy Garoppolo?
And even Justin Jefferson to a degree, after Kirk Cousins went down. Yeah, it's so important, and you can look across the league. You mentioned Rodgers and Devontae in the past, Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase.
Bingo.
Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce
for a long time. Yeah.
Tom Brady and Rob Gronkowski. Julian Edelman even pretty much Brady with those main 3. It's so important, and I think that's again what I meant by this is because who knows? They have a lot of young players, as you mentioned earlier, Gino. This might be the team with the most I don't know, the variance is so high and low, it feels like. It could go one or two ways radically, right? Week in and week out, too. You don't know. I'm not saying it's always going to be low or always high. It's a very high variance team, it looks like right now, with the question marks at least. So Who are the guys you know you can rely on that won't skip a beat week in and week out? I totally agree. I think of even over the offensive line, which has more change this year than it's used to. The Hurts, Brown, Smith trio, I think is going to be your most consistent part of this football team, regardless of whether it's about the coaching staff, personnel. You're right. It's those three, and you could even throw in Dallas Goedert, who's been playing with Jalen Hurts now for 4 years. So that group of four entirely. The other one is on defense. If these guys do pan out,
Yes.
these guys have been playing on defense forever. It's the Georgia boys. It's Nolan Smith, Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis, and Nakobe Dean. And
Even
by the way,
Keeley. Throw Keeley in that
yeah,
equation
and
as
Keeley
well.
Ringo. And you look at like the Smith, Davis, Carter, Dean group of four, they all, like their roles impact the other a lot. So if those guys have chemistry and they do hit their ceilings, they're the Georgia defense again, which is one of, if not the greatest defenses in college football history.
One of the points that was brought up after the Jordan Davis Nakobe Dean draft was how well a 0-1 tech, who is a two-gapping type of player, who has to rely on his linebacker to make the tackle.
That's a huge relationship. So
you have to trust that guy behind you. You have to trust the guy to the left and right of you. That was the Georgia defense. That's exactly what we're talking about. And is it the known, proven chemistry at an NFL level that we know for AJ and Devontae and Jalen Hurts? Absolutely not. But is that something that you are not able to replicate elsewhere if you didn't take this model?
That's very rare when you're
rebuilding.
rebuilding a defense with young pieces that they all instantly come in with the chemistry they do. Like that's
they know the communication. They know they hang out with each other just off the field. They have this relationship.
And you mentioned Ringo. That's 5
predetermined.
of your potential starters out of 11 for the long term if they pan out.
Yeah, and you come from a defense where you learn to see the field by one of the greatest defensive minds in the entire world in Kirby Smart. You are a smart football player. You learned from each other. You got better off of the backs of each other. You're on the field together. You would feel that chemistry, just that ebb and flow between these Georgia guys. Look at the national championship. Jordan Davis would make a play on the line, and who's behind him making the tackle? It's Nakobe Dean, right?
Exactly.
And who's sealing the game when the pass rush hits home in the SEC championship game? It's Keeley Ringo. It's all an ebb and flow. It's a great way to discuss that defense, because defense maybe more than offense, Lou, where offense you can kind of get into that killer, we got two guys, they can take over the game mode. Defense, if one unit isn't working, the other unit for sure isn't working. But if they're all on the same page, like 2022, that's when you really see all the gears start to click together, when the pass rush can mesh with the linebackers, can mesh with those guys on the back end. And having that relationship from Georgia, I know we keep talking about it and waiting to see it come to fruition. I think this is the time that it has to be as evident as ever, because Nolan Smith has to step up in a new role that he didn't take on last year. Same with Jordan Davis. Nakobe Dean has never been a full-time starter simply because he hasn't been healthy enough to be on the field. So that's a new role for him as well. And Keeley could be your number 2 cornerback. So talk about the chemistry needed on top of the new roles. Buy all this. If you're an Eagles fan and you could buy stock in Georgia somehow, like we need to put all our support into these guys, because the state of Georgia is going to make this Eagles defense go.
Absolutely. All right, we'll wrap things up coming up next right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast, with training camp just 2 days away. Today's episode of the Locked On Eagles podcast is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you got to check out LinkedIn Jobs. They have the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just a job board. They help you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else. Even those who aren't actively searching for a new job might be open to the new perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. Once again, post your job for free. Go to linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply. All right, we're wrapping up things on this Monday edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast. Players report to the NovaCare complex tomorrow. Practice begins on Wednesday morning. I'm sure we're going to hear a lot through the media from Nick Sirianni, Jalen Hurts, this entire Eagles team. And, this year gives me, it's like curiosity vibes more than it. You mentioned something that kind of got me thinking in segment 1, like how young this football team is. And me and you are such draft rats. Like, we love prospects and watching players grow and develop. I think it's such a fun, exciting part of a life cycle for a football team. And honestly, like, that's part of why I've been so excited for this season more than any, even though there's a lot more questions. At least in our time doing the podcast together, and even as fans of this football team, when have they ever been this young? But not just this young, but this talented, right? I think there's been times like 2020 they were younger on offense, but they didn't have the top tier talent they do now. Like, this team has always been a veteran-filled, win-now kind of franchise, at least since I've been a fan. And this is new territory, but it's very fun to me. And I think curiosity is the big word. I'm just like, there's so many questions I can't wait to find the answer to, because it's not nearly as predictable this year as it has been in years past.
You look back to when they first started the rebuild with Donovan McNabb and how they kind of overturned that whole team. I mean, that's the first time where you saw like a really look at the Sheldon Brown, the Lito Shepherd, the Bobby Taylor, like how that group kind of grew together as the years went on.
Because even in 2016, that wasn't the case. Outside of drafting Carson Wentz, your team was still veteran filled, and that's how you tried to rebuild in 2017 as well.
You could say on offense between probably like the Macklin years to the end of Deshaun.
Sure. Good point. Yeah.
When they drafted Shady and they kind of
brought those moved things forward
together.
With Cobb. Yeah.
But on defense, was it really anything to write home about? No. Outside of the early 2000s in my fandom, I think you're kind of spot on with this assessment of this team, because you're right. You look at the Carson Wentz years. Yeah, there were a couple of young guys on that team, but they aged out poorly.
I was going to say, 2017, they won the Super Bowl as the second oldest team. It was the two oldest teams in the league in the finals. It was the Patriots and the Eagles. So their plan for even building around Carson Wentz, it never really was with a youth focus until 2020, and that was because at that point they were just so strapped for cash.
And it's one of those camps where it's not a change in coaching staff, where it's a new head coach. It's kind of a changing of the guard, where I don't think we've seen this since probably the last days of Andy Reid, right? Where it was just like that core is gone. Brian Westbrook gets traded. Dawkins gets traded. Like, all those guys get traded. Well, in a different manner, now you kind of see those veterans are aging themselves out. The Fletcher Cox retirement.
It's a new era with a different
Kelsey retirement.
It's a new era with the same core, I feel like is kind of the right way to put it. Like, your coach, quarterback, like a lot of your main pieces are still here, but it feels like a new era within that core.
Yeah, it seems like a 2.0 of the Nick Sirianni era, I would say. And who knows for Howie Roseman, how many evolutions he's been through. But to look at the youth and to see the light at the end of the tunnel of what it could be, to play devil's advocate, it's also a training camp where we're like, if things go bad, we've kind of seen this route before.
Yes.
And
again, the variance, this year is very, very wide compared.
Yes.
Like, I think it could be a lot more radical than we're used to.
Yeah, if you look back at some camps where you're like, okay, this team is not going to get off of the ground running at all. I don't think it's going to be that case. Like, they clearly have the talent. I don't think it makes itself known in training camp that there are any of those concerns.
Do you think there's any consistency concerns because of how young they are?
I think the biggest concern with this team is going to be how they respond to adversity. I don't think it's consistency.
Okay.
I think it's how they respond to Nick Sirianni. That's my biggest concern. Because if there's any sort of coup or way out of, like...
Of course,
It's like the Carson Wentz to Jalen Hurts thing, the Nick Foles to Carson Wentz. Like, if there's anything in that regard where it's starting to separate the locker room, then we have culture concerns yet again, and that's the biggest problem. And maybe because you don't have as great of leadership as you have had in past years, you go down that well. But to play positivity, I think you have a very solid core that you've done much better research on than in past years, where you're not signing guys like Jason Babin to come into your locker room. You're signing high upstanding citizens.
Orlando Scandrick.
Yes, you're getting guys that love football, understand what it takes to be a Philadelphia Eagle. And that is the thing that you have to put all of your weight behind. Like, Chauncey is back. Jalen Carter seems to buy in to the Vic Fangio scheme. These young guys are starting to buy into that too, with the leadership of Darius Slay kind of buying in as well. And seems great from the outside. We'll see in a couple of days how good it is on the inside.
Yeah.
They're flying around on the football field.
And again, it's not a new era, but it kind of does give me like 2013 Chip Kelly vibes from the standpoint of like I'm just so curious to see how practice
curiosity
goes.
Is
how are they
like?
How is Chip using these guys versus what Andy Reid did? And I think that's going to be a little bit of the difference. Not that it's going to be so radically different going from Reid to Chip like it is going from Sirianni's offense to Kellen Moore's, but there is a little of that definitely that makes me more excited for practice to get going this week. And it starts up this Wednesday. We got you covered for 4 more episodes this week and all throughout training camp in the preseason right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast. So thanks for making us your first listen each and every day. For today, though, we're going to sign off. For Gino Camilleri, I'm Lou DiBiase. Thanks so much for downloading, watching, and listening, and let's go Birds.
Fly, Eagles, fly.